Everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the Springfield Township address, State of the Address. My name is Gwen McFarland, and I am the chairperson of the Springfield Township Board of Trustees. And on behalf of my fellow board members and colleagues, I'd like to welcome you to this year's State of the Address. This is the 9th year that we have conducted such an address, and we are so very pleased that you have chosen to be with us today. Many of you, I'm sure, would have preferred to be watching March Madness of some sort, but you've taken this afternoon to give a portion of this afternoon to be with us today. I would first like to introduce you to your other elected officials in the township and my colleagues on the board. First, Mark Burney. Mark, fellow Board of Trustee member and currently serving as Vice Chair of the Board. Joe Hunterlaw, also a fellow Board of Trustee member. And Dan Burney, he's our Township Fiscal Officer, which is also an elected position. In just a few moments, I will introduce Mike Hennenkamp, who is the Township Administrator. Mike will be giving you the Township State of the Address. The address is designed to take a quick back over the past few years and review the major events that have affected and impacted the township and the steps we have taken as a board and staff as a result of these, especially in the year 2014. There will be a focus on how the township has currently positioned itself from a financial, service delivery, and quality of life standpoint. Lastly, we will highlight what major challenges lie ahead and the specific action steps we believe are necessary to meet these challenges. After the presentation, Mike will introduce the department and section leaders of our staff, both the staff and members of our board and fiscal officers. We will be available to chat with you individually or as a group after the meeting to listen to any concerns you may have and answer any questions you may have. As your elected officials, the board understands the concerns and wishes you have for our community. As residents and business owners ourselves, we share a common vision of what we want to see our Springfield Township to look like in the future. This board has a long working history. We have worked together despite our differing political affiliations to make this a great place to live and to do business for everyone, and not just a select few, but everyone. And most of you know that our township is spread, geographically in a lot of different directions. Our diversity is one of the greatest strengths and assets that allows us to blend many different viewpoints into a strong core values and common vision as well. We also have a long history of hiring the best people to run the day-to-day operations of the township, and many of you have had some contact with many of our staff. We direct our administrator through our policy decisions and philosophies to deliver our service in the most effective and efficient manner possible and bring public value, and therefore improving the quality of life of our residents and our business owners. Again, I want to thank you for joining us today, and as I said, some of you probably gave up the March Madness just to come here and share the afternoon with us. I would now like to introduce our Township Administrator, Mike Hennenkamp, who will present the State of the Township Address. And thank you so much. Mike?
Good afternoon, everybody. Technology is a wonderful thing. Let me just start with that. Everybody knows me, knows I hate it, but it's a wonderful thing when it works, and this morning or this afternoon it didn't work. But thanks, Ms. McFarland, and again, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody to be with us. I don't know what this says about you, because it's 60 degrees and not a cloud in the sky out there, but you're inside, probably the first time in how many months it's been. But we really appreciate you taking the time to be with you. I think this, from my standpoint, and I know the board shares this as well, I'm very excited to be up here this year, and that mainly is because of how difficult the last 7 or 8 years have been. I think with some of the tough decisions that the board has made, some of the tough decisions that we've done, and the transformation that we've made in our departments have really started to pay off. And as we look at 2015, I think this township's in the best shape that it's been in, clearly in the last 7 or 8 years, maybe in the last 10 years, and positioned very, very well to go forward. We still have some very difficult challenges ahead of us, as we'll talk about some of those, but we're excited because I think we finally feel like we have a fighting chance. For the last 7 or 8 years, our resources were cut so desperately that what we like to do, what our staff likes to do, what our board likes to do, and that's provide public service, bring public value to our residents, and serve our residents, has been greatly curtailed by the reduction of those resources in the last few years. I think as we stand here today, we understand and want to make it very clear, this Board of Trustees, our department heads, our staff, understands the frustrations that residents have gone through, the frustrations that you see with government just in general, the type of things that we see happen at the federal and state level, and of course sometimes at the local level. We feel like we're somewhat immune to that, but we get lumped into that bunch. We understand your frustration with taxes and the high tax rate, and we're very sensitive to that and want to address that in the best way that we can. And we know that we've got to work hard every day, our staff members, every single day, sort of earn your trust on a daily basis to make sure that we're doing what it is that you want us to do and provide the service to you. As Ms. McFarland mentioned, what I want to do, just for context, because obviously you've heard, for those who've been coming to a lot of township meetings over the years, you've heard us talk about the impacts of what we have faced. But I want to take a quick look back at what's taken place in the last 5 to 7 years. Not to dwell on that, but just to clearly understand the context of what we faced. Spend a little more time in 2014 and some of the things that took place in 2014, and then look forward and kind of where we are right now, our current status, and what is our agenda over the next 3 to 5 years as we move forward from a budget standpoint. What services are we looking at? What new programs and processes do we see? How we want to engage you as our residents and business owners to participate in the township, and then talk about some exciting economic development initiatives that we think are on the horizon, as well as some parks and recreational activities that we think will improve the quality of life. Without question, the last 5 to 7 years have been that perfect storm. We have really seen it come from us from all angles, and certainly not just us as government officials, but you've experienced all these things, obviously as individuals and business owners, as residents, the impacts that you've seen in your job. It sort of started with the national financial crisis that we saw both nationally and globally, which had impacts and had trickle-down effects on all parts of our lives in the township, and eventually certainly were felt by our residents. That meant the loss of jobs. We've had our residents lose jobs. We've seen a tremendous high amount of foreclosures throughout the state of Ohio, and certainly Springfield Township wasn't immune to that. All of those things meant that there was a lack of spending by our residents. And so, you know, those things meant less tax dollars, less things happening, less businesses providing. The biggest impact for the township ultimately was that as property values decreased, that meant less taxes, especially on the commercial side. So we were seeing for the first time in our history, or at least I think of any of us experienced, we were actually seeing less taxes come into the township. All of those things were then coupled by the state of Ohio looking at a way to fix their budget woes, and the way they did that is on the backs of local government. They repealed the estate tax, they reduced the local government fund, the tangible personal property tax, and the public utility tax was all eliminated. The impacts were severe, as demonstrated by this slide. Springfield Township lost 53% of its general fund during that time. the impacts of all of those different things. And I heard a lot of times through comments and through public meetings and newspaper articles, and it always struck me as strange when people said, well, you shouldn't rely on state money. These weren't state monies, they were your monies. The state just decided to keep them rather than return them locally like they had been returned for many, many years. So this was a huge, huge impact. And as I said, one of the biggest problems with this is the fact that townships don't have a lot of options by which to raise dollars. We have been limited now to basically one way, other than some user fees that we can utilize, is property taxes. And certainly property taxes aren't popular. I don't know what tax is popular, but property taxes are certainly not popular. And they're plenty high in this township already. So that is the only way, in a significant way, that the township has been left to raise townships. I think the other thing that was especially frustrating for us is while a lot of governments may not have been doing some of the things that could be done and have been done in the last 7 or 8 years, we believe we have been. We believe we've been been a leader and have been operationally lean. So when these cuts came, there wasn't a lot to trim because we were already doing many of the things that were suggested by the legislature in terms of cooperating and collaborating. And certainly we've done more, and that's probably been the silver lining, but we were kind of already up front. The other thing that we've seen is during this 10-year period, our demand for service, the things that residents want, are not decreasing. They are increasing, and you'll see that in a few minutes by every slide that we have where the demand for our public services are really going up. They're not going down. So it's difficult to meet those things. Not only was our general fund impacted, but our several other funds were impacted by some of these cuts as well. As we saw an additional $40,000 to our road district. This is monies that goes to replace and repair streets, was cut by $40,000. This wasn't a good thing because that fund is already very lean. We saw the loss of close to $70,000 to our fire district and another $120,000 to our police district. So major impacts to these cuts. What we did over that time was respond. As I mentioned earlier, we felt like we were already sort of cutting edge, but when these things happened, we began to look at a number of different ways in which we can address it. And given the severity of this impact, we recognized this wasn't going to be a single answer to this situation. This was going to be something that was going to be multifaceted and something that was going to have to evolve over a long period of time, and it's continuing to do that. And I think I want to touch on what some of those solutions were. They involving the community most and foremost was the first thing we wanted to do is get impact from our residents and business owners as to what options they thought were in front of us, what choices they wanted to make. The board then met in a number of different work sessions and special sessions to address these ideas and work together on what kinds of solutions there were going to be. We made tremendous reductions to our expenditures. We've looked at consolidation and collaboration, and the third and the final kind of piece of that was to look at enhancing some of the revenues, and we'll touch on some of those just a little bit. This isn't done. This is going to be an evolving and an ongoing situation and something that we'll continue to work towards. But as I said, I think one of the first things we did was really reach out to the community, and we went through a very extensive neighborhood planning process that took 2 years. It started by the board and our staff going out into 12 of our different neighborhoods and bringing information to them and then gaining feedback. At the end of that process, we asked for volunteers from each of those neighborhoods to form individual neighborhood committees, and they came and met in this very hall for a period of over a year to formulate and put together a neighborhood master plan. That was an essential part of what we were doing, and eventually had that plan adopted a few years ago, which provides individual master plans not only for every neighborhood, but also comprehensively how we want to deal with that across the board. As I mentioned earlier, our executive leadership team, our board of trustees, were involved in all of these meetings and several and long work sessions to come up with solutions that dealt with, what are things that we can consolidate, what could we make reductions in our expenditures, and what were some of the things that we could do to raise revenue. Our staff meets on a monthly basis in a process called Performance Stat This is a process that continues today, where we meet monthly and we look at ways in which we can deal and gain operational efficiencies. These are sort of the internal things that we believe we can do to make sure that our fire, police, our roads, our administrative services are all functioning at the highest possible level in the most efficient manner. One of the big areas that we looked at was, of course, making reductions. During this period, the 7 to 8 year period, and especially between 2008 and 2009, we made a 35% reduction to our general fund. This was before the real full extent of the cuts had even hit us, and the board was up front with this and trying to get ahead of it, and we hoped at that point that that may be as far as we had to go. Obviously, as additional cuts came from the state, that proved not to be enough, and so we looked at a lot of different other ways. And some of the ways that we did that were gaining operational efficiencies through internal cooperation. Our police department is now doing things with our development services department. Our service department also working with development services, where we used to have cleanups on nuisances, properties done privately. That's something that we were able to do internally and save a great deal of money by doing that. We're looking to continue that process with our fire and DSD and use our fire department personnel in doing our DSD, which is our development services department, deals with inspections, deals with plan review, those types of things, where we can gain greater economy of scale. We're also in a process right now where we're beginning to train our police officers as first responders so that they have basic EMT skills. We know and have known for some time that just simple facts are that our police officers are out in the field. They're going to be able to respond if there's a medical emergency, and oftentimes are the first ones on the scene. So we want to give them that basic training so they can at least start the emergency process until that squad or that first responder paramedic can arrive. And this is something that we've just started about this year. We've been heavily involved for many, many years with collaborations with our neighboring communities, and we've enhanced that. We've enhanced that with Colerain Township by saving a great deal of money by setting up a first responder contract with them for a neighborhood that's to our extreme northwest, which is known as Pleasant Run Farms, and providing service to that community through Colerain, and then we respond. But it's all a matter of response time, and we want Colerain to be able to get there first. We're also doing some things with our police department, with Colerain Township, on dispatch calls coming in, where we're cooperating with them. Again, the idea is that each of us have different strengths and weaknesses in our communities at different times where we work our dispatch, and we're sharing those costs and sharing our personnel to enhance that. We just recently entered into a memorandum of understanding with the city of Wyoming for our senior services, way in which they're going to enhance the programming that we provide in our senior center, and we're going to make our facilities more available. Wyoming had greater senior staffing abilities, we had greater facilities. So another cooperative way in which we were able to work together with other local governments. The other critical piece, obviously, was revenue enhancement. And as I said in the beginning, there's not a lot of ways in which to do that. They'll involve some paying for residents, and unfortunately, taxes is generally the way that we would do it. But the community was very supportive early on, back in 2008, 2009, and then again 2011 with police and fire levies. We started charging some athletic associations to use our athletic fields, which brought in some revenue. Our senior center and the rental and the changes that we made to this building are now offsetting almost entirely our cost to provide senior activities. So while these aren't necessarily money-making ways, they're allowing us to break even in a lot of ways. Probably the most controversial thing that took place in 2014, of course, was the JEDs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. So that kind of takes us to a little snapshot of what took place and takes us into a kind of a review of some things that happened in 2014. And I know, speaking for myself, 2014 personally was probably the most difficult year of my nearly 30-year career in local government. It came from a lot of different angles and was sort of a culmination of a lot of things that had happened in the previous 5 years. Certainly our finance and our financial situation became as dire as it was, as we saw the full impact of all the state cuts. All of the things that we had done had had a significant impact, but we realized they weren't enough, and we had to go through a very, very difficult and a very controversial JEDS process, which was divisive to the community, and we're certainly happy to have that behind. We're certainly happy that the community eventually supported that. I'll talk about that in just a second. It made great strides to solving a major part of our problem, but it was a difficult process. For us internally, we lost a very dear colleague of ours. Our finance director, Dorothy Carter, passed away after a long bout with cancer. Very difficult process for us internally to go with, and obviously very difficult for Dorothy, who's been with the township for about 15 years, for us individually. And she passed away this January, and certainly we miss her dearly. But despite the challenges, despite some of the difficulties we faced, I also think a lot of very important things were accomplished in 2014, and it's sort of set the stage for where we're going to go. I just want to touch on some of those kind of department by department. One of probably it's probably the least sexy, but one of the most important things for us that we did in 2014 was our internal insurance for our employees. We took that, and we're now a self-funded insurance cooperative here in Springfield Township, which is in our first year saved us nearly $400,000 for the township. So it's kind of a scary first step, but something that paid off yearly for us in the first year. And I want to give a lot of credit to our Human Resources Director, Larry Mullins, who sort of navigated that process for us. We've been successful in getting grant awards through the Bureau of Workers' Comp, something that's benefited our fire department, the bariatric supplies in the fire department, and also we continued our success in our aggregation program. It's something we'll touch on a little bit more. This is aggregation for energy savings of what you save on your gas bill and on your electric bill. You might not think you're saving anything after the last 2 or 3 weeks of winter that we saw, but if you were staying with Duke, there certainly is an offset there. Sometimes hard to see unless you actually go back and compare what you would have been paying. We've got some good news of what we're going to do in 2015 and beyond, and also looking at some other ways to do additional aggregation programs in the form of solid waste. Our police department, as I mentioned, our demand for services have not decreased. Over 26,000 details were handled by our police department. We're happy to report that we saw a 10% reduction in Part 1 violent crimes in 2014. We saw an 8% increase in criminal arrests, something that the police department always has a very high success rate on dealing with the issues. We were able to, through getting our staffing slowly back up to where we needed it to be, institute some very valuable programs. One is Impact. Impact is a very creative program that the department started a number of years ago. And it's a program that we hope you really don't even know or see, but it's ways to deal with whatever particular situation we might have going on at a time. If we're seeing people breaking into cars or breaking into homes, we can designate a certain portion of our police force to work on that very specific problem. We were also very fortunate and very proud to have Lieutenant Colonel and our Assistant Chief Rick Bly graduate from the FBI Academy. Rick becomes the 4th member of our police department to have graduated from the FBI Academy, which for a department of our size is almost unheard of. I don't know that there's too many other departments, probably in the country, that can boast that accomplishment. In our Explorers Post, this is a branch of Boy Scouts that come, individuals who were in their teens, who think they might have an interest in law enforcement. They spend time in this program with our police officers, placed 3rd nationally in a competition this season, something that we also are very, very proud of. Our EMS department continues also to see the same type of activity and the same type of increase in calls for service. In fact, we had all-time highs. For our EMS, fire and EMS departments led by Chief Rob Leininger, dealt with just over 4,500 calls for service for EMS and almost slightly over 1,200 calls for fire. We continue to be cutting edge in some of the technology that we use for some cardiac intervention programs. and continue to provide, response time for fire is always the most critical thing, and that's why we do a lot of unique things, because as Gwen mentioned, the configuration of our township is very unusual. We have islands, we have areas that are not really that easy to get to, and so the innovativeness of our staff is very critical in making sure our response times are high. It's kind of amazing now, I'm sitting here on this kind of a day and talking that just a week ago that parking lot had piles of snow that were 4 or 5 foot high. So it's easy to quickly forget about the winter that we went through, especially the last month of that winter. But the fabulous job that our service department does under the leadership of John Musselman. Salt has been one of the biggest issues. We've talked finances. Well, salt, of course, is one of our biggest concerns. In 2014, we spent $270,000 on salt. Unfortunately, about early February, we thought we were going to have a pretty good year and dodged the bullet. The last month has really not allowed us to do this. So we're probably looking at another $350,000 in salt purchases in 2015 because of the winter that we have. But our guys do a great job. I can't tell you how many calls. My email is usually filled with the calls that we get during the snow emergency. And you'd be surprised that probably 95% of them are positive. People that take the time to thank us for the job that we do. The guys do a wonderful job. They're very, very prideful in the job that they do to make sure that the roads are safe so that we can get not only our police and fire personnel out in the case of an emergency, but get you to work so that you can get where you're going to go. The road department has also been very, very successful in getting grants this year for street improvements. Over $1 million of grants were obtained through a process known as SKIP, which is a statewide program that is managed by Hamilton County and also our stormwater district. Those dollars have allowed us to about double the amount of dollars that we would have. And of course, our department is also very busy with tree removal, potholes, catch basins, and also does the maintenance in our parks. Our senior services, this is a department, the facility just to our west, out these doors. We serve about 365 seniors, and as I mentioned, I'm very, very happy, and Tom Schneider, who leads our senior service and also is responsible for managing this facility for rentals, for weddings and banquets and that sort of thing, has pretty much offset the cost of providing senior services to make sure it doesn't have an impact on our general fund, because we can pretty much offset with the rentals that we get. Mentioned earlier, we're very excited and just starting in the early stages of that new partnership with the city of Wyoming. This facility here has won an award this year. The Grove was the Wedding Wire Couples Choice Award, and I think that's a credit to the job that Tom does. Obviously, this is an older facility. It's opulent by no means, but it hits a certain price point for certain brides and the level of service that Tom provides to them. Our rentals in 2014 were up by 22%. Also in 2014, we created this in 2013, but they actually got their designation officially as a nonprofit organization. We created an Arts and Enrichment Council, which is now known by and goes by doing business as Arts Connect in Springfield Township. And Arts Connect is slowly and very, taking on all of the events and activities in the township. It was our goal to take that another way of taking that off the township's books, the responsibility. We felt that that was a critical piece of making a vibrant and a successful community. So the need was there, but we didn't want to be able to use tax dollars. We wanted to minimize using public dollars towards that. And so the Arts Connect is in its early stages of doing that. They've got about $8,600 of grants and sponsorships and about $25,000 overall budget. But it's making that impact and it's slowly doing the things that we want to do. We're hopeful that we'll be bringing back the summer concert series this year. But the different type of activities this year in our community, we've had over 280 volunteers participate in township and help in township events. And through both the township and primarily Arts Connect, there were 26 different events, realizing over 5,000 participants. This year we've also created something known as a Community Improvement Corporation. Many think that this was created because of the JEDs. That's not really true. What we want to do with the CIC is something very similar that we're doing with Arts Connect, and that the CIC is the economic development arm, an agent for Springfield Township now. We know we need to continue to grow our board. By law, the board of the CIC is essentially the same as your board of trustees. State law requires that at least about 65% of that board must be township trustee members, and so it's our board of trustees, myself, and one township resident. But that is to continue to work on community development, economic development. Why we do that is so that we can do some sort of unique incentive programs and focus uniquely on where we want to go in the township, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Kind of in summary, in 2014, I think what we did is we answered some of the questions that we posed in 2013. And we said it was a critical time when we were going through our financial crisis that we knew we had to look and say, how are we going to, what are our services going to look like and at what service level? I think we, for the most part, have answered that through our resident feedback and feel like we're at the right size right now. We're providing the services that the residents are asking for and the level of services about there. Our organizational structure, in other words, the method by which we deliver the service, we think is pretty well right-sized as well. Again, this is something you're always and annually looking at and tweaking, but for the most part, we think the way we're doing it, the method, is the right way. It's the right combination of contracting certain things and providing other things in-house. And for the most part, I think the next question has been primarily answered, but still needs a little bit of investigation as we go through the rest of this year and into 2016, is our financial structure. There are some opportunities potentially to do things a little differently than we're doing them today, and we're going to spend time investigating that. Kind of where we're at right now in the township, and taking a quick look at, with that, looking back at what happened to us and what we did in 2014, we're in pretty good position for the next 3 or 4 years. And there's a little bit of background. Springfield Township, there isn't one fund. We don't have one pot of money. We actually have 27 different funds, and each of those 27 different funds have specific purchases and are very restrictive in nature. And what I mean by that is sometimes there can be a high balance, or one of the funds can be doing fairly well. We're not allowed to take the money from that fund and use it for a different purpose. And that's just pretty common in local government, but especially common in township government. And one of the things I think that's difficult is maybe we don't do a really good job of explaining that to our residents, because as I meet people, that's always seems to be the thing that's sort of misunderstood. I think another area that over the years has been, or over this year already, is with the JEDs in our general fund. And I think this slide does a pretty good job of taking a fairly complex thing and making it fairly simple, or at least as simple as we can make it, and looking at the impact. If you look at this cup and figure that cup is what we had totally, this was our general fund back, a number of years ago, was the whole cup. After the state cuts, we were pretty much, this represented almost $3.7 million of revenue we had coming in annually. And this is, again, just one of our funds. This isn't all of them. This is just the general fund, which happens to be the most permissive fund that we have. But the state cuts brought us down to just about 48% of that money left. I get the question, probably had it 20 times every time I go to Kroger's or somewhere, and somebody says, hey, what are you doing with all that JEDS money? Well, all that JEDS money is just getting us a little further, and obviously we don't have all that JEDS money yet, but these are our projected, is that JEDS money is going to be about $1.2 million, which still leaves us 20% full from where we were back in 2008. And these are the ways, how are we going to make up that difference? Well, we've made those differences up through a whole bunch of different things that we've done with our collaborations, our consolidations, and things that we will continue to do in that nature. So the JEDS money isn't extra money that we had, it was just a portion. And we said that through all of the hearings, that it wasn't going to be the full solution. It wasn't going to answer all of knows. If for any of us that have been around a long time, the full 3.7 was, pretty lean to do all of the things that we were being asked to do even back then. So the challenge isn't gone. It's been, certainly I'd shudder to think where we would be without the JED's revenue, but it hasn't certainly solved the problem completely. Just recently, we went through and we got information from Moody's Investment Services. Back around 2002, the township went through its first ever bond rating, and we received a AA2 rating, and Moody's just recently confirmed that. That probably doesn't sound like a very exciting thing. It's really not. A bond rating is sort of like the credit worthiness of a community and sort of talks about the financial condition of a particular community. Why that's important is because of all we went through. And Moody's spent a lot of time looking at the reduction of our revenues, the reduction of our tax base, and I was very nervous that we were going to see a downgrade. But some of the things that were very complimentary about were the actions taken by the board to deal with it and the various innovative programs that we did, and of course the JED to bring in additional revenue. So it did stabilize and allow us to maintain that rating. In our major departments, and the township is funded, as I mentioned, there's 27 different funds, but there's 3 or 4 really big ones that involve most of the township services. Our police district, I'm very happy to report, is very, very healthy right now. And this is a credit to the leadership in the police department. Chief Heinpohl, Assistant Chief Browder, Assistant Chief Bly have done a lot of work and come up with a lot of creative ways to maintain the level of service while at the same time reducing some of the expenditures that we have. This chart, and we'll talk about this and all of our different charts on March the 24th in a lot more detail as we go through our permanent appropriations. But what this is basically showing is as we stand here today, we're projected looking pretty healthy through 2018. I'm pretty confident that through 2019, that the levy that the police department lives off of will be, it'll have useful life throughout that period, barring something really critical happening. Pretty much the same situation in our fire department. The only difference in our fire department is just about as healthy. The only difference there is that in 2011 we passed a 1 mil levy, and the community was very supportive of that, but that was put in as a 5-year levy, and so it's going to expire. Assuming we renew that levy, that we go through and replace that 1 mil, the fire district looks pretty healthy, but that's the only little bit of an unknown and why their time frame is a little shorter is because that levy does expire in 2017. We have a regional drug task force known as DART. Springfield Township serves as the administrative agency. There's about 15 or 16 different entities throughout Hamilton County that participate in this department. This is something that's gone on for a number of years, and the township's been the administrative agency for about 10 years. While this is important is if this agency didn't exist, if Springfield Township didn't step up to run it, we would probably look at in the neighborhood of about $300,000 annually in additional cost to our police department. So that's what this particular department does. I mentioned earlier we've had tremendous success in our SCIP process. SCIP is State Capital Improvement Program. It allows us to compete competitively for dollars that come to Hamilton County, and then all Hamilton County agencies compete to try to get these dollars for road improvements. And I touched on that a little bit earlier. In 2014, we gained over $1 million in SCIP revenues, allowing us to take for every dollar that we put in road repairs, we essentially doubled those dollars through what we were able to get in grant dollars. But despite the fact that we've had tremendous success with SCIP, I think our infrastructure remains probably the biggest thing. Of all the things that keep me awake at night, right now, our infrastructure is probably that. And we know that we have a lot of streets that were built about the same time, and our current funding doesn't allow us to keep up. And so this is going to be a major target area in 2015 and 2016 to figure out how are we going to fund our infrastructure. I think one of the problems is that we're talking about local streets, and a lot of times when residents look out and have years and years ago when we put the road levies on the ballot, they look and they see that their street is in pretty good shape. And they think, well, you know, I don't really need to pay more money for my street's okay. But the problem is, if you're not maintaining those that aren't, when yours comes due, it's not ready either because we're still so far behind. So this is going to be, again, a major area that we're going to have to focus on. In general, just, you know, it costs money to provide services. And just trying to strike the right balance between the demands and the wishes of the community and what is that reasonable amount from a cost standpoint, I think that is the fundamental basis and the fundamental challenge for local government, is trying to figure that out. What we want to make sure, and what our goal is as a board and our staff, is that through our services, we're bringing public value to you. If these are services that you value, if we're doing things that aren't appreciated, that aren't valued, that aren't needed by residents, those are the areas we need to get out of that business. And at this point, we really haven't found where that is. Maintaining the quality of life is something also that needs to be you know, something that's critical to maintain this healthy community. And throughout that entire process, we've got to be sensitive to the impacts to our residents, to our business owners from our tax standpoint. One of the examples that we have from some good success, and this is sort of a mixed message a little bit, is what we've seen happen to home values. While the county has, and if you've seen in the paper, the assessed valuation, the total amount of property in Springfield Township has actually gone down by 5%, which is kind of a mixed bag, but generally not a good sign. We've seen increased cost of home sales, and something that I think shows that in 2014, nearly just under $10,000 increase in the annual sale of homes, which I think is a very, very positive and uplifting thing to look at. The most important part, and the last part that I want to talk to everybody today about, is where are we going? You know, we've spent some time talking about what we've done in the past and what the results were in 2014, but really about what our future is and where we're heading during the next few years, the next 3 to 5 years. The board has always had a very strong philosophy, I think, as far back as I've been here, and certainly my background is in planning, but we've always looked towards the future. We've always looked towards where we're going to go and the importance of planning in Springfield Township. I think that's, you know, my staff members, certainly the board will know and tell you that I'm probably the ultimate control freak there is. You know, everything is, you know, drives me crazy, and trying to make sure that we can control everything. But I think that's what my job is. My job is to try to control the environment, try to control the things that impact our residents. And that's what we've been trying to do, is make plans and provisions and contingency plans for every kind of situation that we face. Obviously, it doesn't always work the way you hope it does, and that's why I think every time that happens, we try to adjust and improvise when that comes through. The mission statement for the trustees and for the township, I'm certainly not going to read this to you, and I don't know if you can read it, but I'll just highlight a couple parts. That our mission is to be a leader, and we want to be a leader in providing very innovative services, especially things that bring that public value, enhance your quality of life. We demand that all of our staff members be professional, and if you've had contact with any of them, when you have contact with our police and our fire, and especially with our service department, I think it's amazing that every time I get those kind of calls, and that's the first thing that people say, is how professional your staff was. That's something that the board demands, that we provide a high quality of service, and want to make sure that we're, as I mentioned, providing that public value to our residents. There's 3 fundamental objectives. These have really been pretty much unchanged in the last 7 to 8 years. The first, of course, is that we want to achieve financial stability. That is a lofty goal during these times, but something that we're inching back towards. We've come through, I think, the worst times, and we're better positioned now, as I mentioned, than we probably have been for the last 7 or 8 years to do that. We want to make sure that we're enhancing community engagement and community engagement opportunities. And what I mean by that is we're going to find a variety of ways to get and talk to our residents and allow them to participate in their government. whether that be on policy decisions or whether those are just in social opportunities to be with neighbors and friends. And then lastly, we're an older community, and we know that it's critical that we revitalize and accentuate our neighborhoods. We have some neighborhoods that are struggling. We need to do what we can. We are predominantly a bedroom community, and no matter what we'd like to be from a corporate standpoint, there's going to be serious limitations on our ability to do that because of the way the land uses are in this township and have been for the last 40 or 50 years. But we need to accentuate those neighborhoods. As we go through all of those and try to accomplish those goals, as I mentioned over and over again, the thing that we hear and our staff hears from me and I hear from our board on a regular basis is the sensitivity to the tax issue. And so simply going to you and say you have to pay more to do these things is not an answer. So the challenge for us is striking that balance. I wish I could say taxes will never go up and we've got a plan to make them go down. I don't know how realistic that is, but we certainly can't just go back every year and say, it's costing us more, it's going to cost you more. The last, I think, 7 or 8 years have been sort of unprecedented, but if we can maintain where we are, I think we can do some things with some innovation and creativity in this process. One of the things, as I mentioned earlier, is to look at, are there opportunities to consolidate our levies? And what kinds of advantages and disadvantages does that present? We've talked about that in just a little bit of detail, but that's something we're really going to be drilling into this year. And I think probably by early 16, the board's going to be faced with a decision as to whether that's something we want to pursue. As we look through creative programmings, we're excited about some of the work that Chief Leininger has done with the group in this area and potentially enhancing some of our service through something known as paramedicine. This is something that is being done as sort of revolutionary, where paramedics will actually have a slightly different role in coming out to your home and partnering with hospitals to do some things. I don't know enough about this to go too deep into it, but it's something that is certainly a big change and Chief Leininger has worked on. We think could have major impacts and improvements to our community. We're going to continue to work on internal consolidation issues. As I mentioned, we've done a great deal of this. Our Development Services Department that goes out and deals with nuisances, inspections, zoning, partnering with our fire department, who already is doing those types of things for building department reviews, and consolidating that staff is going to save us some money and we believe ultimately enhance the service. We spent a lot of time on succession planning. If you look at our staff, a lot of us have been around a long time. Some of you have been coming to these meetings, know that we're a little long in the tooth, and we've had a tremendous amount of experience on our staff. We want to make sure that continues and that we have that expertise in the future. We've worked very hard on that to maintain that executive leadership team, and you're seeing some of that even begin to transform before us right now, especially in our police department, our service department. Fire and admin are a little bit down the road, but not too far as well. This is a great opportunity to recognize Chief Heimpolt. Our succession plans are probably, this is the department we've looked at the most. Dave Heimpolt, who has been with this township for over 40 years, will be retiring in 2015. And Chief, I just asked you maybe to stand up. Tell you how long ago that was. Dave started his career in January 18th of 1975. That was before the Reds won their first World Series, at least in my lifetime. They had won a couple before that. But Dave has held every rank in the department. Under his leadership, the department was recently recognized by the Commission on Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies with an Accreditation Award of Excellence in 2013. This is the highest distinction that a police department can be awarded, and it's one of only 10 departments in the state of Ohio that have received this distinction, and probably one of only about 300 nationally. So it lets you know the type of excellence that we have in our department and the type of high standards that we've held for our departments. Our partnerships with schools. We've done a lot of things consolidation-wise with other local governments. This school is an area that I want to really focus on, and I think the board wants to focus on in the future. We know how critical it is. Schools have a huge impact on the success of a community. And we certainly want to recognize that. I think is Ty Overson here? There's Ty Overson is the superintendent of the Finneytown Local School District. Ty, thanks for being with us today. Ty and I have met. We're excited about some potential partnerships between the township and the school. And these are things that we want to do. We're very unique in that Springfield Township has portions of 7 school districts. And so those partnerships are very, very important and something that we want to continue. Aggregation programs, we're happy to announce that we've entered into a new agreement with Integris, who will be your supplier for both gas, will be your supplier for gas. You're continuing to be with the current supplier of First Energy for your electric service, but we've had tremendous success in this program. In years past, we've saved our residents as much as $700 a year in your utility cost in both gas and electric. Some of those days are a little gone because of what's happening in that industry, but it's still a good opportunity to save somewhere in the $50, $75 a year per resident annually for being in this program. We're taking a real good look at the option of doing this for solid waste, garbage collection, garbage aggregation. In fact, on March 24th, we're going to have a public hearing. That's at the Allen Paul Community Room at 5:30. So anybody who wants to learn more about us entering into a sole proprietorship type deal where you would have one vendor, the sort of negative would be residents lose the choice, so you'd have to go with that provider. But the plus side would, we believe we could save you some money, upwards of $5, $7 per month in garbage collection. That remains to be seen, but something we're going to be working for. Our community engagement, again, is something we talked about earlier, but something that's always very high on our agenda. And there's a number of ways that we want to do that. Our engagement opportunities are sort of structured into meetings that are informational, educational, like this one here is today. There are specific meetings like the garbage aggregation and our permanent appropriation meetings on the 24th where we want to get public input, where we want to give you an opportunity to provide input on a critical policy issue. There are others that are more participatory in nature, where they give you an opportunity to volunteer, to get involved in a particular project, something that's near and dear to your heart to improve your community. And then we have some that are just geared for entertainment. They're there for your leisure in a variety of different ways for you to engage and spend quality leisure time with your neighbors. There's information, as you can see, throughout the room. We have each of our departments have set something up, and there's information about each of these different things and upcoming events and ways that you can get involved. So please make sure that before you leave, you take a flyer on some of the different community engagement opportunities that are going on in the township. One of the last areas I want to talk about, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's our economic development opportunities that we look. We talked a little bit, or I mentioned a little bit about the creation of the CIC and what our agenda is for our CIC, our Community Improvement Corporation. In the short term, the next thing that we want to do is get a strategy, sort of a 3 to 5 year strategy, where the CIC can act initially as sort of an ombudsman for local businesses to navigate some of the other existing incentives that are out there that the county and or state provide. But also, the CIC gives us an opportunity to do some unique things that are unique to Springfield Township. The residential incentive grant is one of those things that are currently in place. This allows you to apply for a grant if you're currently paying the JEDs because you both live and work in Springfield Township. There's an opportunity for you to apply for a grant to get a grant back in the same amount that you paid in that tax. And if you have questions about that, see me or Chris Gilbert about that later. But there's a lot of other things that we'd like to see that CIC eventually work on, and that's work on looking at what we think are our top 10 sites primed for redevelopment. We're looking at individual neighborhood housing strategies in each of our 12 different neighborhoods. Of course, we want to retain the businesses that we have here in Springfield Township, and we want to expand where we can and bring in new businesses. Workforce development obviously is very critical to make sure that we have a workforce that can support those types of businesses. We're working to make sure that our housing and our housing needs, that we're providing housing for a variety of different housing choices for young families, for young professionals, for empty nesters. A lot of variety and diversity in Springfield Township, and we want to make sure that we do that. One of our strongest assets, of course, is our location. We are essentially located in this area. We need to take advantage of that to bring in and to retain quality and a lot of talented restaurants. We want to utilize and improve our retail. We realize that retail follows housing, so as our housing stock improves, we'll get the quality type of retail that our resident wants from a neighborhood basis. As we talk to developers, as we talk to people in our community, one of the things that is always surprising for them and surprising even for us sometimes, I think we take for granted the phenomenal leverage points and the assets that we have in this community, our public institutions, our cultural institutions that kind of line up around the Winton Road spine, whether that be St. X High School, whether it be the Finneytown schools, the YMCA, township government, all these different types of public, semi-public, and cultural type things are draws to our area that I think sometimes that we take for granted and something that we want to take advantage of, so that our neighborhoods are revitalized. The housing in our neighborhood is something that is going to be critical to our future as we move on. One of the other really big roles, and something we just this week had a great announcement on, is another role of our CIC, and that's going to be in what we call our core development. The township has acquired years ago property, about 50 acres of property known as the Werder Nursery property. We've owned that since about 1999. Initially, we thought that was going to be a park development, and since then the community, through all of the different meetings, realizes the value of that property is in some type of development. That will also be heavily involved with parks and sort of nature as well in that development. We just recently, this past week, signed a preferred developer agreement with a company known as the St. Francis Group, and we're going to be moving forth on that particular project that is sort of loosely defined, and then by this aerial photograph that shows the area generally down at around, you can just kind of see in that site, Cross County Highway, but it's basically Winton Road is sort of the western boundary, and the property that sits behind Whitaker Elementary. So Galbraith to the north, Winton to the west, and North Bend to the south, a large area. The 50 acres that the township owns is sort of centrally into that, and ultimately we see for redevelopment opportunities in that entire area. We've been studying this since back about 2007, 2008, and have done a lot of work that I think will be very, very helpful in the direction that we go. We have a lot of plans for what we can see, but ultimately mixed-use development in this particular area to take care of our housing needs and look at possibly commercial, retail, all kinds of different things that we're looking for. There's concept plans that we've done on this particular site that will be restudied as a part of this process. This preferred developer agreement is a 15-month process that we're going to be looking at to move forward. And we have some ideas of what this property could look like. Not to say that some of these are going to turn out exactly like you're seeing in some of these slides, but some of the visuals is to the type of housing that we may see, the type of development. These are images that we study of places that we think are very successful. And not to say that we're going to try to recreate these types of places, but it gives us the type of the standards, the development standards that we're going to expect and have expectations for as we move through this development. I think another critical piece to the economic development, obviously, is parks. And in 2015 and early 2016, we're going to be looking at updating a parks master plan for our community. We have a potential very unique opportunity with a place called, through the University of Virginia, through a project called Play, in which they have approached the township about building a one-of-a-kind, all-inclusive park. And I know I've been up here rambling, so I won't go into a lot of detail of what that is, but it's a very unique opportunity for where we could go with the township. Bike paths, something that's critical. One of the #1 things for what people are looking for, when they locate in a community is access. And for the younger, for the millennials, that access is not vehicular. It's pedestrian. They want to be able to walk to things. They want to be able to use other modes of transportations and get on our bike paths. Ultimately, having a community facility, a cultural arts center, is something that we're also looking for and hoping to eventually add into the township. I think that gives you an idea of what our vision is, where we think we're going in not only 2015, but the next 3 to 5 years. As Gwen mentioned, sort of the next part of our agenda today is we want to make the board available both individually. They will stay here. We have displays for all of our departments. So if you have information, want to speak to any one of our department heads about things, any of our elected officials or myself, we'll stick around here in the room. I just want to maybe briefly introduce our staff here at Springfield Township. Just ask them to stand so that if you have a question about a particular area, who you want to approach here during this time. And if you don't want to do it today, obviously we're available by phone any day. We're available by email, and more than willing to meet individually with you. At any time, if you have questions, you want to dive into anything in more detail that we do here in the township, either our board or our staff, certainly willing to do that. But just want to introduce our Assistant Township Administrator, Chris Gilbert, is in the back. Chris is, as I mentioned, our Assistant Township Administrator. He's also our Director of our Development Services Department. Sitting in the back is Kim Cox. Kim is our Finance Director. So if you have questions that involve finance, Kim can help you there. Larry Mullins, I mentioned earlier, Larry is our Human Resource Director. Chief Dave Heimpolt is in the back, as well as Assistant Chief Rob Leininger and Assistant Chief Rick Bly. Rick Bro's over here. Chief Rob Leininger in the back. Assistant Chief Rick Bro, where are you? I saw you earlier. Yeah, I knew you were back there. That's why I pointed over there. Rick Bro is here. John Musselman is our Service Director. Our Assistant Service Director, Mike Gould, is with him. Tom Schneider. Tom, is that back there? You're silhouetted. Are you back there behind the camera? Tom is our Senior and Community Services Director. And Kim Flam is up ahead. Where Tom is? Tom's back here. That's not Tom. I can't see that. As I show you, I can't see who's back there on the camera. Tom's hiding back here. And Kim Flam's up front. Kim's been moving the slides for us. And Kim is involved in our projects, events, and communications. Again, I appreciate you taking time out of a beautiful sunny Sunday to spend time with us. I hope you get your questions and spend a little bit more time with us. And I thank you for coming. Have a great day.